Welcome back to my channel. Survivor Series War Games was already ripping the roof off the arena with chaos and intensity, but the entire atmosphere shifted in an instant when the lights suddenly dropped without warning, sending a ripple of confusion and anticipation through every corner of the building as thousands of fans leaped to their feet at once, sensing that something massive was about to unfold. And in that deafening mix of shock and excitement, a thunderous reaction exploded from the crowd as a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, because out of the darkness came Seth Rollins, making his stunning return at the exact moment no one expected, and the sheer sound of the crowd welcoming him back felt like a shockwave crashing through steel and concrete as Rollins charged toward the double cage with fire in his eyes, moving with the kind of purpose that only comes from months of pent-up frustration and unfinished business, looking like a man who had been waiting for this very second to unleash everything he had been holding inside, and as he burst into the structure, the energy of the match instantly transformed, shifting from brutal to explosive in the blink of an eye, with Bronson Reed being the first to even turn around in disbelief before Rollins struck without hesitation, snapping off a vicious superkick that echoed loudly against the steel and dropped Reed where he stood, sending the message immediately that Seth Rollins was back and he was not here to ease into anything. And before the chaos could even settle, Braun Breaker charged forward with the raw aggression of a runaway train, clearly trying to overwhelm Rollins with brute force. But Seth was one step ahead, showing the precision and instincts that made him who he is as he pivoted out of danger in one fluid motion, avoided the full impact, and launched himself into a devastating diving knee strike that smashed into Breaker and sent him crashing hard into the unforgiving cage wall. And just like that, the entire momentum of War Games flipped on its head. The balance of power shifted in real time, and a match that had already been brutal suddenly became unpredictable on a whole new level as Rollins stood in the middle of the wreckage with the crowd roaring his name, the sound of thousands of voices blending into one overwhelming wave of noise that fueled every movement he made. And in those moments, it felt like the entire storyline of the night had been rewritten in real time, as the return of Seth Rollins injected a completely new energy into the battle, turning what was already a war into something even more personal, more volatile, and more dangerous, because this wasn't just a return, this was a statement, a declaration that the architect was back to reclaim his place in the center of the storm, and everywhere you looked inside that cage, bodies were slamming into steel, fists were flying, alliances were being tested under pressure, and yet all eyes kept drifting back to Rollins as he moved through the chaos with purpose, striking anyone who crossed his path with the kind of intensity that only a man on a mission can summon, and you could feel the electricity in the air as the crowd fed off every stomp, every strike, every collision that echoed through the structure, and War Games itself seemed to respond to his presence, as if the very ring had shifted its energy to match his fire. And from that moment forward, nothing about the match felt predictable anymore. Every clash felt heavier, every near fall felt more desperate, and the war that was already raging suddenly felt like it had reached a new level of danger because Seth Rollins had stepped back into the battlefield, and the psychological impact alone was enough to shake everyone involved as opponents who thought they had control suddenly found themselves scrambling to adapt to a force they did not plan for. And you could see it in their eyes as they hesitated for just a fraction of a second too long. Long enough for Rollins to strike again and again, keeping them off balance and forcing them to react instead of attack, and that hesitation was all he needed to take command of the moment. And as the match raged on, the sound of bodies colliding with steel mixed with the desperate cheers and gasps of the audience to create a relentless rhythm that never let up, and through it all Rollins kept pushing forward, absorbing punishment, dishing it out, refusing to slow down, as if the months away had only sharpened his hunger rather than dulled it, and every time he rose back to his feet after taking a hit, the crowd rose with him, feeding his momentum, amplifying every move with raw emotion that poured down from the stands like thunder, and it became clear that this return was not about easing back into the spotlight, but about seizing it with both hands and dragging the entire division into a storm. And as War Games continued to spiral deeper into chaos, the effects of his return rippled through every competitor involved, changing strategies on the fly, turning confidence into panic and bravado into survival, because Seth Rollins had stepped back into their world and reminded them all what true unpredictability looks like. And as the night pushed forward and exhaustion began to weigh on every wrestler inside the cage, Rollins only seemed to grow more dangerous, feeding on the violence, the noise, the resistance, as if every ounce of struggle only sharpened his focus and strengthened his resolve, and the crowd could feel it too as the energy in the arena never dipped, not for a second, because everyone knew they were witnessing a defining moment that would echo long after the final bell, a moment that reshaped the landscape of war games and signaled the return of one of the most dangerous competitors in the business. And as the dust slowly began to settle and the carnage inside the cage became fully visible, the significance of what had just unfolded became even clearer, because this was not simply a dramatic entrance or a surprise comeback. This was a power shift in real time, a reminder that in the chaos of war games, no lead is ever safe, no plan is ever perfect, and one single return can turn the entire world upside down in an instant. And if you felt that shockwave from Seth Rollins' return resonate through your screen, you're not alone, because war games truly flipped upside down in that moment, and nothing will ever be the same after it. So drop your thoughts in the comments right now and tell me who you think Seth Rollins should face next after unleashing this level of chaos. And don't forget to hit that like button and smash subscribe so you never miss another wild moment like this ever again. As the echoes of steel and the roar of the crowd still rang through the arena, the tension inside the double cage only thickened, because now everyone knew that with Seth Rollins back in the fight, nothing was going to slow down, and no one was safe from the storm he had unleashed, and the competitors who had moments earlier been focused on their own rivalries suddenly found themselves constantly glancing over their shoulders, worried about when and where Rollins would strike next, because his presence alone had reset the tone of the entire battle, turning every exchange into a fight for survival rather than strategy. And with every movement he made, the energy in the arena stayed red hot, as fans who were already exhausted from the emotional roller coaster somehow found a second wind, screaming at the top of their lungs every time Seth connected with another strike or took another brutal hit. And why?